Today, boys and girls, we're on a lesson 11.4 on page 643, Understand Area. Now, before we move to area, I want to review perimeter real quick. Remember, perimeter is the distance all the way around an object, and when we label that, we label it in units or feet or centimeters or something like that. Area will be a little bit different when we label, and it's much different in what it means. So let's look at unlock the problem here, as we always do. And it says, connect. You learned that perimeter is the distance around a figure. It is measured in linear units, or units that are used to measure the distance between 2 points. Area is the measure of the number of unit squares needed to cover a flat surface. A unit square is a square with a side length of 1 unit. So the length of the square is 1 unit. It has an area of 1 square unit. Okay, so again, let's take a look at an example for perimeter first, and then we'll discuss area. So here we have a square, okay, and if we measure the perimeter, it's the distance all the way around the object. So the perimeter of this square is 1, 2, 3, 4 units. That's what they show us right down here. The unit of that, the perimeter of that square is 4 units, okay, all the way around the object. Area, on the other hand, is different. Area tells us the amount of space inside the square. So really all we're doing is counting how many squares we have, and in this case we have 1 square. So we label that as 1 square unit. This tells us area right here, square, okay? So if you see anything that says square units or square centimeters, square inches, things like that, you know we're talking about area then, and that's the distance, or not the distance, but that's the amount of space on the inside, okay, or the number of squares that we're counting. That's the name, square unit. Okay, let's look at the math idea. And it says you can count the number of units on each side of a figure to find its perimeter. On each side to find the perimeter. Then you can count the number of unit squares, or the number of squares, inside a figure to find its area in square units. Again, perimeter, distance on the outside, 1, 2, 3, 4. The distance on the outside of a unit, so on the math idea, the perimeter equals 4 units. Okay. Area is the amount on the inside of the square. So area of this equals 1 square. I have to zoom out a little bit. Unit. That's the area of that square inside the math idea. Okay. All right. Activity here. Geoboard with rubber bands. And you can use your geoboard on your iPad if you need to. I don't think you're going to need to, though. Okay. The first thing we're going to do is, and this is kind of a geoboard right here, right? So that's why I'm thinking we won't need to use the electronic one on your iPad. And then you'll have to be bouncing back and forth between your app and the YouTube video, and it gets really cumbersome, right? Really tricky. So we can use this little geoboard right here. All right, it says, use the geoboard to form a figure made from 2 unit squares. 2 unit squares means just basically 2 squares. And we're forming a figure, so those 2 squares need to be connected, right? And I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. So here is 1 unit square, and here is a second unit square. So now I have a figure that has 2 unit squares. All right? Let me show you an example that does not work. Actually, I'll show you a couple. Here's one, and here's another one. That doesn't work because it's not one figure. We actually have 2 figures, right? They're not connected. So that doesn't work. And then here's another example that doesn't work either. We could draw something like this with 1 unit square and a second unit square here. Again, that doesn't work because they're not really connected. They're just barely touching at the corners. Their sides need to be connected. So that's why my green example works, and this blue example right here does not work. Okay? When we connect them, the sides themselves have to be connected, and we're looking at something like this instead. Okay? Now we come down to the bottom here, and it says, what is the area of this figure? All right, and again, we're looking at the green shape, not the blue one. The area of that figure, we just count the squares. So the area of this figure is 1, 2. It's 2 square units. Okay, we just count the squares. Let's slide over here to B. And now it says change it so that the figure is made up of 3 unit squares. And again, they need to be connected. So here's a great place for you to pause the video, draw your 3 unit squares, and then you can resume the video and see if yours is similar to mine. Okay, I'm going to draw mine, and I can draw individual squares like this. 1, 2, 3. Now I have 3 unit squares. Okay, 1, 2, 3. My shape doesn't have to go side to side. It could go, it could be tall as well. So I could draw something like this. Okay, and now that time I just drew the full rectangle. I didn't draw individual squares, but I still could do that. And I have 1, 2, 3 squares. One other shape that I can think of right off the top of my head is something that looks like this. And it still works because the sides are connected. 1, 2, and 3 unit squares. All right. So for all of them, they're made up of 3 individual squares. So for all 3 of my shapes that I drew, each one has an area of 3 square units. This one has an area of 3 square units. So does my blue one, and the red one also has 3 square units. All right, let's go to the next page and the try this section, and this would be a perfect time for you to try on this on your own, and then resume the video when you're done to check your work. It does say to draw 3 different figures that are made each of 4 unit squares, and then find the area of each figure. So go ahead and pause the video, see if you can do these 3 on your own, and resume it, and we'll see what we come up with, okay? Good luck. All right, I'm assuming you did your 3 shapes. I'll draw 3 of my own. 4 unit squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. I can do a 1 by 4. Okay, that one has 1, 2, 3, 4 individual squares, so its area is 4 square units. All right, coming over here, I'm going to draw a slightly different one. Draw a couple lines like this. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 squares. The area, 4 square units. And there is a third one. Yeah, there it is. Okay, and on my first one, I drew a really tall shape. I could draw one that's very just wide as well, something like this. If you have that, that would work as well. Or I could get maybe a little more creative. Let's see. I could draw something like this. There's 1, 2, 3, and I could add a fourth one here. Okay, that would be 4 square units. I could also add my fourth one over here. And that would also be 4 square units. So there are a lot of different ways. Just make sure it has 4 squares, and then you're at 4 square units. So the question here, how are the figures the same? Well, they're the same because their area equals 4 square, that's the abbreviation for square, units. And that's the abbreviation for units. All of them have the same area. They're all made of 4 individual little squares. And they are different, okay? They are different. Let me zoom in a little more. There we go. They are all different shapes. They're different shapes. They also probably have different perimeters. If we look at the perimeter of this blue one, it has a perimeter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Its perimeter equals 10. This square has a perimeter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, then remember, perimeter is the distance all the way around the object, right? And this one has a perimeter of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It has a perimeter of 10. So 2 of them had a perimeter of 10, but one of them just had a perimeter of 8. And we'll look into that a lot closer in a later lesson. All right, let's look at share and show. Shade each unit for number 1, and then count the unit squares to find the area. So you're going to come over here, shade these in. Okay, nice and neat, much better than I just did. And then you can count the area. And then 2, 3, and 4, you're also counting the area. Number 5 and 6, I like those. You're deciding, do I need to choose area or perimeter? So if you're buying a rug for a room, do you need to know its area or do you need to know its perimeter, the distance around the rug? So I'm going to draw a fancy rug here. There's my fancy rug. And so if you're buying a rug for maybe a living room, do you need to know its perimeter? That's the distance all the way around. Or do you need to know the area? What's inside? Whoops, sorry about that. I got a little carried away. And then putting a fence around a garden. If you're putting a fence around a garden, I'll draw a fancy fence here. Do you need to know the distance all the way around the garden? Or do you need to know, holy smokes, there we go. Or do you need to know what's inside the garden? So go ahead and fill out share and show, and then I can check it for you and you can move on to your assignment. That's it for me today, boys and girls. Remember, when you're labeling, and I think most of it's done here for you, but when you're labeling for area, it's square units. That's the big Q that you're measuring area, not perimeter. As always, this is Mr. P, boys and girls, and I am out.